I think you'd agree with me that we've heard some really remarkable and fascinating stories of innovation from very diverse perspectives, and we're now going to have some time for a roundtable discussion, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. And innovation is often a messy process, and sometimes what we say is if innovation is 100% successful, then that's really not innovation, right? Because then that's probably just a bit more of the same or some continuous improvement. So, what I'm interested in to start off the conversation is to hear from each of you, was there a moment when you were almost ready to give up? So innovation is sometimes hard and difficult, and you've had different experiences. And if so, if there was that kind of a moment, what or who supported you in moving forward again? Who would like to start with answering that one? Yeah,
thank you. I can share my experience because actually I wanted to drop a number of times, but the most significant one occurred about a year ago. And actually, I think that points to the kind of innovation you're about, because I started working on these concepts as part of my PhD when I was at CERN in Geneva about 10 years ago. And I realized after all these many years, and from what I saw as innovations in my area, that it takes a long time for an idea to come through and to reach the market. And actually, for ideas coming from PhD works like the one I did, it takes about 10 years. And so when I was about the 9th year into my journey, I was completely exhausted because you, as an entrepreneur, you're pushing your business on a daily basis, and you're a one-man orchestra, so you're doing everything. And so this is really sucking energy out of you, and at some point you may be just exhausted. So, but you mentioned serendipity, which I think is a key aspect of success in innovation. In my case, this happened when I met the actual CEO of the group of Almeris, and suddenly we had a very intimate discussion, and so we spent 5 hours having lunch and talking about our vision, and I discovered that first we had the same vision about data, about sensitive data markets, and all the things that we start seeing materializing. And at the same time, I realized that what we had done in a niche market for biomedical research was exactly what's becoming a need for a number of markets. And that was kind of a revelation of finally the fact that I was true in going through all this journey. So that is about the time when I bounced back when everything getting really even more exciting than the first part of the journey. So that was my experience.
Great, thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? No, we'll
okay.
come back here.
So I think if I reflect back to what nearly was a failure, and James will probably laugh when I said this, but I was involved with some of the work for the National Programme for IT in the UK, which I think was about an $18 billion £1 spend plus some. So I worked for a business that was involved in data management in pre-hospital care. We tried very, very hard to be secured as part of that contract. 6 months of looking at a 580-page legal document from the UK government that was probably made up by solicitors from 10 different offices who never spoke to each other, was probably a really tough time. But we were expecting to win a very, very significant bit of business. I mean, tens of millions of dollars for our business. But the risks were very high, and it was going to be very challenging for us. And if it failed, it would have also impacted our medical device business. So we got to a point where I pulled in the best project manager I knew from Australia, some people from the States, hired some people, and we decided the safest thing to do was to walk away. And at the time, we felt like really devastated by that. But we decided there's a better way to go about the business because we had good customers and good relationships. And it was easier for us, and it proved to be more successful in the end, to take little nibbles at the pie and go and speak to individual care provider unit and contract with them, which was much more like a decent dinner and a handshake than a heavy contract. And actually we started to grow the business probably faster than we would have done if we'd waited on the big ticket. So I'm a big advocate now of crawl, walk, run, and take little baby steps and then get big that way. It's much safer.
Great. Thank you very much. I think,
Sure.
Yep.
So, in this job, there was a moment where we were starting Innovation Center, and we were, getting everyone to pitch their ideas and for work on it. We had the budget. We had, amazing innovators sort of lined up. But then I realized there's no HR mechanism to get anyone on board. Right? They had to keep. There was no sort of bucket or headcount or really any kind of solution that was workable. And I mean, when you work in a company like Mac, I mean, this is everything, right? So there isn't really, when there's no solution, it just, the computer says no, and the whole thing was in jeopardy. And so for that reason, and it was really kind of shocking to me also that they went so far with the exercise without, there was no being a sort of very viable solution in place. And at the time, we had a head of HR Germany just said, well, he said, just do it, just go ahead, get those people on board, and when push comes to shove, and they're under the wall, we'll find a solution, and it'll be implemented. And so we did. And I felt sort of bad telling people because they're asking me, well, what's really going to happen when you come to Innovation Center? What will my contract look like? I was like, I don't know. And that means a lot for people who have very, very stable jobs, and it's their life. So I asked them, well, trust us here. We'll find a solution. We'll push them, and it worked. So the solution was great, and they're very happy with how things are. But it was true that it didn't really happen until the very last minute. So, and this was the head of the HR who actually saw the deficiencies in his organization, and he just said, well, sometimes you just have to take things really far, and then it'll work.
Do it and then ask for permission later, right, sometimes?
Pauline. Sure. Yeah, so one challenge we had in terms of the innovation and the change, or I had personally as a leader, is when we removed the sales targets in the US for the sales force, which was a huge change. It was very hard. And unfortunately, what we did is we over-engineered the compensation scheme. So we took away the sales targets, and the sales force in principle said, okay, we get it, we understand why we're doing this. But then we ended up testing them all the time on their scientific knowledge. We put them through all kinds of role plays and simulations. So we tried to make a compensation scheme that was somewhat objective and didn't have a lot of manager input. But again, we completely over-engineered it. And then the managers really turned into kind of checkbox where they were just ticking behaviors. Did you do this? Did you do that? And we completely lost the hearts and minds of our team. And I was leading the organization at the time. And it was hard personally as a leader because I believed in principle to the change. I didn't believe in the way it was implemented. And when some of the sales leaders spoke up about it, it was met with resistance from the top. In other words, toe the line, get on with it. Are you not a believer in what we're trying to do? So I realized a couple different approaches. One is if you try to drink the Kool-Aid and tell your team how great this is when there are flaws, that doesn't work. Then getting in the trenches and kind of bitching and complaining right along with them, that doesn't work because they need a leader. And I was in the bookstore. I actually read a book called Reality-Based Leadership, and I thought, wow, this book was meant for me. And I was at a sales conference, and big sales conference, where there was just tons of bitching and complaining, and people just could not move on. And finally, I just said, okay, time out. Everyone time out. Get out of your chairs. Come up here. We're going to have a little fireside chat. And I implemented some of these reality-based leadership principles, which is you have to acknowledge and help your team say, do you see where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do? Yes, I get it. Okay, so what are some of the risks? What are some of the problems? And they need to be able to vent and get it out. So you list all those risks, and then you start moving them towards a place of possibilities. And how could this work? What could this look like for you? And that, going through that exercise where they realize I heard them, but I still was focused on the vision and towing the line behind the vision, but then moving them to a place where they could start to be part of the solution, and we could propose some different approaches, which were adopted. But big leadership lesson and pain point for me along the way.
Great, thank you.
Oh, yeah. What you've seen that we're developing is basically a mix of biotechnology and engineering. And you already think that, unlike biotechnology, engineering always works. You just have to work more. So when you present a prototype to a customer, they say, okay, when will the final product be ready? I would say, December. Okay, so I'm interested. So I sign a contract, and in December, you deliver the first final product. Okay. So we signed the contract, we're very happy, then the penny dropped. Oh shit, we actually have to deliver a product in December. So, so you work, you kind of finish it. You always kind of need a couple of weeks more, but deadline is the deadline. So you pack your product and you send it to the customer, which was in India, with the tech transfer team. Then you eat nothing for the first 24 hours. And then the next morning, the phone rings very early, and it was supposed to be the middle of the night in India. I say, okay, hey, tech transfer team, how is it going? Well, not very well. We have a problem with the machine. We are locked in the lab by a very, very angry man with a very, very big knife. And he said he will not let us come of the lab if the machine is not working. So take a pencil. I will give you a list of consumables and pieces that you have to send me very, very quickly. And so after that kind of experience, interesting, we took two decisions. And one, boost our QC process a bit more. And B, never, never, never be part of a tech transfer team when you send something.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So from your research and what you've seen, where would you see that resilience is most present, or what do you see about, perseverance, serendipity, resilience, James?
I guess, I was just trying to draw together all the points that were being made from the panel. And, I think one key thing for me is, knowing when to let go. And not pursuing an idea relentlessly just because it's you own it and it's the original idea, and I think all of you sort of said that in different ways. You need to learn from your mistakes, learn from failure, be prepared to move on. So I think that's one of the key lessons for me, which should make you more resilient as a company, I think. I guess for me the sort of really interesting thing is from a sort of innovation management perspective is really what the balance between different types of innovation projects are within the portfolio of projects. And you've got to be able to take a risk and try out new things and do risky projects, but you also need the ones that are a bit more bankable and allow you to, you're pretty sure they're going to succeed, and that's where you get the kind of right balance of resilience from, I think. But I think especially in healthcare, we innovations tend to evolve as they're being adopted, and they take a different form in different markets, different contexts as well, particularly when it's a complex healthcare innovation, which involves a bit of technology, but a bit of organisational change, new service models, and so on. I think you have to accept that the original idea isn't going to be the same necessarily when it's deployed in the real world, and your idea may be completely different. And so I think I don't know. What am I saying? You need to be flexible. You've got to be adaptable, flexible. Willing to take a risk, not having so many risks that you end up collapsing the company.
Yeah. Thank you. So time for questions from the audience. So let me know who you'd like to ask your question to, and then we'll see if someone else wants to pitch in.
Thank you. The question is to Colin. You've been setting the trend at GSK regarding the incentive plans for reps. Which other company do you see have followed through this example, either in the US or Europe or other countries? What's your benchmark on this one?
Well, so we haven't seen many companies follow suit. We do see some pharma companies that are doing more, putting more weight in the incentive program on, let's say, some type of customer value type of scores or voice of customer. So we've seen some incremental moves, some other companies that do team-based incentives, but nothing quite as bold yet as what GSK has done. So we really, as we're out in front of this, we have to benchmark against what we believe great looks like versus how many other companies are following suit. One thing that I pay particular attention to is how competitive is our sales force versus industry competitors in a particular market. So across about 15 of our priority markets, we look at how effective is the sales force, again, their capabilities in front of a customer as defined by an independent third-party audit and as benchmarked versus our competitors in those markets. So I'm looking more at that as some of our KPIs as opposed to, who follows suit. I'm also about to undergo a big piece of internal research around, now that the incentive scheme globally, since the sales targets have been removed for about almost 2 years now, is looking at how has that impacted motivation, how has it impacted retention, what aspects are working or not. So that will be a very important piece of research for GSK.
Thank you. Next question. Any questions? Yes? Okay.
So I have a question for Lukasz. Kind of when you work with your think tanks, kind of there is always a little bit the risk that people go completely crazy, and kind of I've seen outputs of like hackathons that looked interesting but far away from feasibility. So how do you intervene, make sure that kind of something tangible, usable, potentially with an ROI comes out of it, and not just kind of big kind of blue sky ideas that are just absolutely not implementable?
That's a great question. Thank you. So sometimes blue sky ideas do come. So we had a synthetic biology team that was really for a while focused about the non-existing food market on Mars, which is, by the way, really when it's there, it's going to be really big. 300,000 euro per kilogram of getting something to Mars. And it's part of the process, but we employ what we call facilitative leadership, and Sabin was sitting there, he knows a lot about that. So you do guide them. They do go through a sort of series of trainings a little bit about the topics around business modeling, and they really know that they need to suggest, at the end they pitch, right? At the end they do need to go through the process of selection. So about 50% of ideas are actually followed through, which is still quite large number. But we do talk to them about the fact that this has to have buy-in in the business. A lot of their work is really bringing people on board and taking the temperature. I mean, blockchain is a good example. It seems to be taking up some part of the business more than others. We use that also partially to guide us. At the same time, we do lead. So it's a little bit of taking the company with us. Sometimes you have to convince people that maybe we're not going to be making food on Mars, but there are some other potential markets that are maybe a little closer. But totally agree with that. It's a very interesting journey, and sometimes you can't, and sometimes they will propose something crazy, and in the end, I'm not entirely going to stop them. Like, well, if you feel like you have a big vision, go ahead, go out there, and I'll be cheering from the sidelines.
Thank you. In the meantime, anyone else would like to?
Thierry Ondé, 360 MedLink. We've talked a lot about innovation in technology, and less so in innovation in organization or management. And I really believe, according to the professor said, that there is something there. So does any one of you have any experience in new ways of managing or new organizations?
Well, it would seem that both Lucas and Colleen are in that topic. Would you like to share something about new ways of innovating?
I'm thinking about what yeah, why don't you start?
I understand the question correctly. So it's about how to innovate innovation, or is it about management? Right? That's a part.
I think we discussed very briefly, for instance,
Yeah.
new organization in hospitals, for instance, because we need to have more innovation in the way the healthcare system is organized.
Yes.
Because if you not link the technological innovation to the managerial or organization innovation, then you don't go anywhere.
Sure. So. Oh, okay. Sorry. I think it's a very it's very pertinent what you said. You do need so technological innovation is a part of it, but it requires pushing innovation requires business model innovation, ecosystem innovation, whatever you call it. So we try to encourage all of these things. When it comes to, for example, the blockchain team that we have in the think tank, it's not just R&D people. The people on the team who are working with a sort of blood in the line of the industry. There's finance people on it. There's BT people, information technology people, and they really are working on how we can maybe use a technology as a way to rethink organization and say look at new ways of building trust across not just our organization but other organizations. And the same with business model innovation. Our performance materials are very tied to sort of per gram pricing, right? So when they sell liquid crystals, so TV, they price it by the gram. Now, as now becomes a new generation of display technologies, OLED, you need order of magnitude less of this compound. This mechanism starts to break down. You really need to rethink the business model together with technology, because how do you charge for a molecular monolayer for molecules of the thing? So you need to, and for them it's a big step. So we encourage them to do that. We show that there's a lot of by example, a lot of ways to look at business model innovation, and we try to drive that too. If necessary, also organizational process innovation. So we agree it all comes together as you will. You have a say.
I mean, I think your question is also, I think, it's about healthcare systems and healthcare providers and organisations, not just private sector companies creating the innovations. And I think when it comes to the healthcare system itself, whether it's France, whether it's the UK, as I said, I mean, it's very, very difficult to change them because we've had 50, 60, 70 years of, increasingly high quality healthcare delivered in a particular way, with particular institutions, particular organisations, all established and embedded. That's not, so it's like a super tanker. You can't just sort of suddenly do a U-turn in a super tanker. So I think, I mean, that's not to say nothing can be done, and but it's got to come. Part of it's got to come from the top. There has to be direction from government and, the ministries of finance, which ultimately support healthcare, and they've got to do things with the payment and reimbursement systems to support innovation, to recognise the fact that for those adopting healthcare innovations, it's often costly, and you need to recognise that in the early stages at least. So direction from the top can make a difference and can change the wider sort of context within which things can be done locally within hospitals or primary care systems. But it's also got to come from the bottom as well, and you've got to give frontline staff working in healthcare permission to be innovative and permission to change things and come up with new ideas and do new things. And your corporate immune system, Lukasz's corporate immune system slide, which was about Merck, could be applied to a hospital or equally. And I'll just give you one example where in the UK, where there was a very successful change programme for hospitals, driven partly from the top, but also from the bottom. And this was around emergency care. So people going into turning up in a hospital with unscheduled care. And there's a waiting time problem. People were waiting hours and hours to be seen in the emergency room. And the government said, we'll make a target of 4 hours. Nobody can wait longer than 4 hours. Of course, everybody said, this is awful, what are we going to do? But they also said, we're going to create a support network to give you all an ability to share your ideas, provide support from the top, try things out, experiment, do new things. You're being given permission to be innovative. And it was hugely successful in just freeing up this kind of, wellspring of ideas from the bottom, which led to changes and was very successful in driving down the waiting time in hospitals for emergency care. So, it needs top and bottom, carrot and stick. It can be done, I think.
Great. Thank you very much. Sure. One. One example?
One. Okay. So just thinking about some practical examples of some other change driven within an organization or through leadership. So I think too about some innovation in tiered pricing that we've done at GSK, where in some of the emerging markets that they will pay no more than 25% of the price of our medicines in Western markets, and we give back 20% of our profits that we earn in some of those undeveloped countries back to the countries. We're partnering with organizations like Save the Children, where we were fundraising in order to change or to save the lives of 1 million children, and we engage our employees in that fundraising effort. Things like risk sharing with hospitals and health systems when you launch new medicines. Innovative approaches to how you design contract sales organizations, how we do risk sharing with them to increase our variable resource. So I think there are a lot of other just real practical examples of how you can innovate through your structures and your leadership.
Great, thank you very much. So I think it's time to continue this engagement, this dialogue, this conversation over some cocktails in the garden downstairs. And before doing that, I'd like to give each of you about 20 seconds to share with us some final thoughts, and then we'll have Sébastien conclude this part of the event. So should we just start from this side?
Yeah. So regarding our journey and in our area of interest in the digital world, I think that we are entering a very interesting era. So it's really moving fast in technologically speaking. Things are evolving, requiring a great attention. I think it's about a new society that we are building. You've seen the blockchain example. We mentioned big data and a number of innovations that are derivating from these new approaches. And I think it's becoming necessary for all of us to keep attentive and to self-educate ourselves to these changes, because we really need to embrace and to accompany the change and not to prevent or block it. So I would just conclude by saying that it's really important to be aware of what's happening, to understand technologically and societally what these innovations means, and make sure that we keep attentive to accompany the change.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly say that, innovation is all about people, like at the beginning. And we need to really think about them, not just the technology and the different incentives that drive them to. Like we want to start innovation in a particular field, let's say, healthcare systems, etc. We have to think about how can we incentivize people to do it. Don't just think about technology, but think about the people. Maybe that would be my takeaway.
Great, thank you.
The first example published in a medical journal of an article about telemedicine was in 1879. telemedicine still isn't mainstream. Let's hope that the innovations that are being worked on here, amongst all you know, the great ideas you've got, get to market a little quicker than that.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Thank you. So, I mean, I'd like to suggest that digital health is dead. Please stop wasting money on marketing apps. Connected health is the future. Getting data, really engaging with the patients in a bi-directional way, and being able to liberate that data in a safe and secure way is going to create a real value for people. You know, please talk with your marketing teams and help them understand that.
I will take that challenge. So I think about the world we live in, the acronym VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I would just encourage all of us and challenge ourselves to think different, to act different, and to be different, because we have to. Healthcare and the world requires that of us.
Thank you. I like to think that for innovation, size of the company really doesn't matter, and we are trying to demonstrate that even in a mature and regulated market, the challenger, the innovation, come from sometimes small players. So do not need to be really big for being an innovator in a specific market.
Great. Thank you very much. And I guess building on, Colleen, what you just shared, you know, I'd like to encourage all of you to really look at where are you being an innovation enabler? You know, where are you really fostering that culture of innovation? Where are you giving a mandate to, you know, to your teams to innovate? Where are you supporting innovation? And, you know, sometimes even if it's a little less comfortable, you know, where do you kind of get stuck in the, you and I, you know, all of us can get stuck in the, well, you know, it's different for me or not invented here. And you know, sometimes when we look, we're a little surprised at, you know, how quickly that can show up. So that's, you know, that's the invitation. Really be an innovation enabler and support your teams to think newly, act differently, and produce, you know, those different results. And with that, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for, you know, your presentations, for what you shared with us. It was really fascinating topics and discussions, and I think it's time to hand it over to Sébastien.